Welcome to Rethinking Communication. I'm your host, Michael Ashford. Come with me on a journey as I explore how we better connect with each other through the power of our words. For most of us, formal education left gaps in our ability to communicate well with each other, especially when trying to navigate conflict, inspire change, and overcome misunderstandings. I'm a former journalist, a speaking coach, and a communication expert, and my goal is to encourage you to rethink what it means to be an effective communicator, from the stage to the meeting room to the living room and everywhere in between.
As we move from 2025 into a new year, 2026, Happy New Year, everyone. I want to share with you one of the most significant observations that I've made over the last 365 days about how we communicate that I'm going to be taking with me into 2026. Most of us, including you listening right now, we believe that we are good communicators when in reality, most of us struggle to communicate well. Now, this might sound like a little bit of a shock, and what I most often come up against is somebody saying, well, I know how to communicate well. I'm a good communicator. It's everybody else that kind of struggles with that. It struggles with communication. You see, that's what I've come to understand. We all think we are really good at communication. We think we're good communicators. Nearly everyone that I encounter thinks they're a good communicator, but then they struggle with some very important aspects of communication. They struggle to inspire without ultimatums. They struggle to get others to change without force or without begging. They struggle to gain support without pleading. They struggle to confront criticism without taking offense. They struggle to get others to listen to them even when they disagree. That is possible, by the way. And they struggle to consider any other answers or decisions or solutions that differ from their own. And again, I hear this all the time. Well, I'm good. I'm a good communicator. I know how to make my case, or I know how to get others to come alongside me. It's everyone else that struggles with communication. And believe me, I used to be there as well. Absolutely. I want to take you back to it's been almost 10 years ago. I want to tell you how I knew I was a poor communicator. I was the vice president of marketing and strategic partnerships at a large software company here in the Denver area where I live. And I had been in that role for a long time. We had actually relocated the company's headquarters from San Francisco to Denver. I was a part of that headquarters move. I moved from Kansas City at the time where I was working remotely and built my team of marketers in Denver. And over the course of a couple years, we being the executive team and our teams that we hired in Denver, we really turned that company around so much so that we got acquired. We had taken the company from running a net negative loss to a positive profit, and we got acquired. At the same time, the acquiring private equity firm acquired a very similarly sized company and merged us together to form the new entity. Very common in the private equity world. But in that world, you have two CEOs and two chief operating officers and two VPs of marketing and two vice presidents of customer support and customer success. You just have a lot of redundant or duplicate positions. And so in that world, some of you may know, you start to get this internal jockeying and politics playing for position. And I became the vice president of product marketing, and my counterpart at the other company became the chief marketing officer. I reported to him. I didn't take that well. I had been in the industry that we were in for many years. I had led marketing teams. I took it as a personal slight that I was not given the chief marketing officer role over my counterpart. And rather than adjust to the new reality of what I was working within and adjusting to the new leadership within not only the marketing department, but the company as a whole, I, to be quite honest, actively worked to subvert my new boss. I do not take pride or joy in admitting that out loud, but I worked against him. In that moment, I felt justified. I felt assured in doing because I was wronged. I was slighted. I was not giving the position that I deserved. I go back to those things that I listed earlier. I couldn't seem to get anyone else to change without me trying to force the issue. I couldn't inspire my new boss to take up any of my ideas without pleading or begging, or in my mind, that would have been debasing myself to somebody who I felt didn't deserve the position. He was doing exactly what he had been put in that position to do. And years later, I hold no fault or ill will towards him. Now, he and I would not have been good together in the long run, I don't think. We had very different ideas of how to market and how to run a marketing team. But that's beside the point. The situation was not untenable until I made it untenable because of my lack of communication abilities. I thought I was doing a good job. But in reality, I was not able to handle the changes that were happening. And ultimately, I lost my job because of it. I was shown the door. So I could not inspire. I could not get others to come alongside me. I could not gain support for my ideas. I could not generate and communicate up the ladder to talk about my criticism in a way that didn't seem like I was attacking. I also couldn't take criticism of my own ideas without taking offense, as I mentioned earlier. I could not get past my disagreement. And in so many ways, I do blame myself, and I have worked on this intensely over the last decade to become a better communicator. But when I look back on it, yes, I am not proud of how I showed up in those moments. And of course, I am not proud of the ways that I could not handle the situation and could not handle the change, and ultimately put my family and myself and our livelihood in jeopardy and at risk because of that by losing my job. But I also don't fully blame myself because I was doing what I was taught to do growing up. In so many of the ways that we are taught through our education from K through 12, kindergarten through 12th grade, and on into college or university, we are taught one style of communication, and that is this debate style, this arguing style. Make your case, be right, be certain. Most of us are still communicating with through the lessons that we learned as children. Most of us are still communicating through the lessons of our youth. We're communicating like children. And that is not saying that you are childish or that you are a child. We are communicating through the lessons learned at those pivotal moments of our lives. We were taught a one-way view of communication, that you need to be self-assured and certain of what you know, be able to regurgitate that one way towards somebody else and make them understand your point of view. Make your case, argue, debate it. Communication in this way that we've been taught is seen as just telling others what you know and what to do. If I can boil it down to anything, it is that. The one directional version of communication, telling others what you know and what to do with that information. And that's how I showed up in that role. That's how I showed up in that role with the chief marketing officer. And when faced with conflict, when faced with confrontation, when faced with disagreement, when faced with an inability to just have my ideas be accepted rather than inspiring and bringing other people along and teaching and showing, I couldn't handle it. And unfortunately, that is how I see most of us showing up in the world. That is how I see most of us communicating. When I say that we're communicating through the lessons of our youth, that's what we're holding on to when I say that most of us think we're good communicators, but we're actually not. We're doing a good job of regurgitating and modeling how we were taught. We're not doing well at the other half of communication. I call how we were taught exertive communication or exertion communication. It is all about getting your point of view across. Again, going back to what I said earlier, at the risk of repeating myself, it is seen as telling others what you know and what to do with that information. It is exerting your ideas, your thoughts, your opinions on others. That's good communication because that's what you were taught. The other half of communication is the extractive, the extracting out of and pulling from others for a fuller, richer, more well-rounded view of the situation, the issue, the topic at hand, whatever it may be, the challenge, the opportunity, all of it. And this is where all those things that I said earlier come into play that I don't think we're very good at. When it comes to our communication abilities, how do we communicate to inspire? How do we communicate to get others to change, to gain support with our words rather than forcing, to confront criticism even when we disagree and not take offense by it, to consider that I might be wrong and there could be other answers, decisions, solutions out there that are different from my own. And in fact, understanding and agreeing with the reality that there are many things that I am wrong about and seeking to go find out what those things are rather than digging in and saying, I know what I know. This is my truth. And I'm going to remain steadfast in that. That tends to be how we communicate. And we often look at people who act and communicate in that way as being confident, as being bold, as taking a stand. And that is simply not the case. Because what's happening is you have everybody who agrees with that way of communication or the ideas being shared there, and they just naturally get on board and say, yep, that's what I believe too. I agree. But the other half, we'll call it, of the audience, the population, the people who you're trying to make that case to, shut down because there is no communication taking place. They're feeling forced. They're feeling as if the decision is not theirs. When we bring in extractive communication, that's when we create a more well-rounded communication style that works for all of these things that I've outlined. I now know I was a very poor communicator all those years ago when that merger, that professional slight as I took it, caused me to not be able to handle the change and lose my job because of it. So how do we then, as we move into 2026, how do we get better at the extractive? How do we get better at becoming a more well-rounded communicator so that we don't just show up communicating through the lessons of our youth, that we don't just show up communicating like children? Well, first, you have to understand how people change. And there are two questions that I'll get to that help you align with how you know people change. I have said on this podcast, and I say in many talks, and I share this quote all the time from John C. Maxwell, author, leadership coach. People change in 4 seasons. They change when they hurt enough that they have to, when they see enough that they're inspired to, when they learn enough that they want to, and when they receive enough that they're able to. Love this quote. And when we can understand that those are the 4 seasons in which people change, then we start to apply those to ourselves and say, well, one of those is not like the other 3. And I always go back to the first one. People change when they hurt enough that they have to. Now think about that. Does anyone want to be hurt so badly that they have to change? Does anyone, another way of saying that is, does anyone want to feel forced as if the decision is not theirs to change? And the answer is unequivocally no. We don't like that. That is not how we desire change in our lives. I hear all the time that people are resistant to change. Well, no. Actually, I think many of us understand that change is a necessary part of life. I hear that all the time. And those two statements conflict with each other, that we're just resistant to change, but then change is a necessary part of life. And the two don't add up. The type of change that we're resistant to is the change that doesn't feel like it was our own decision, the change that feels forced upon us. And if we can understand that we would rather, to use that quote, be inspired, to learn, or to receive from someone else, the ability and the wherewithal and the motivation and the inspiration to change, well, then how does that change your approach, your communicative approach? If you rely on exertive communication, where it's just telling others what you know and what to do, understand that that's probably not going to do you much good. You're not going to get very far unless you have the authority to make it happen. And there's a very big difference between inspiring people to change, motivating people to change, getting people to change on their own, coming to that decision on their own, and forcing people to change through just having the sheer control and authority. That's also very different from being a confident speaker or a confident communicator. Just because you have positional authority and control does not mean you are confident. So then the question then becomes, if you understand how people change, do your actions and your words accomplish your goals or help you accomplish your goals? Exertive communication, I would say, typically does not. It is more the extractive side of communication where you're pulling from others, where you are bringing others along through teaching and inspiring and asking questions. It is in that extractive communication that true change can take place. And so going into 2026, I want you to start asking yourself two questions more often when it comes to situations as I've described. Those two questions are, what's my goal and what could I be missing? If you land on those two questions going into a board meeting, a team meeting at work, going into a potential difficult conversation with a relative or a family member, when you go into, I don't know, a political conversation or a school board meeting or a meeting with a teacher where you're having to talk about some really uncomfortable issues, right? Those two questions, what's my goal and what could I be missing, when taken within the context of understanding how people change and knowing that it is exertive communication that's probably not going to do the trick, then those two questions can help align you and take a different route than that aligns with how people want to change. And let's be honest, most of the time we are in communication to bring about some sort of change. The type of change or the type of communication that doesn't elicit change tends to be, you go meet up for coffee or drinks with a friend and you're recounting how bad work is, or you're recounting what's going on in your life. Those are necessary and needed conversations, absolutely, but those aren't the ones I'm talking about. Those aren't the ones at work or in relationships or in our societal interactions where there may be conflict or tough decisions at play. Those are the ones I'm talking about. When you can align on what's my goal and subset to that question, are my actions and my words helping me accomplish that goal? Then asking yourself, what could I be missing? That puts you in the posture of extractive communication, where what could I be missing means I may not know everything here. What do I need to do to be able to pull from others, to be able to pull out of others? I have to ask questions. I have to get curious. I can no longer communicate through the lessons of my youth, where I am communicating like a child to debate, to argue, to make my case, to be certain of what I know and be strongly held to that. I am open to some flowing there, some flowing in and out of certainty, some flowing through curiosity to bring about fuller, richer understanding of the situation. An offshoot of that then is understanding that when somebody does not support you in your goals, when somebody is perhaps actively working against you, that withheld support is often the result of unvoiced concerns or criticisms or questions. If you go back to my example from my job earlier, rather than sitting down and having the opportunity to talk through my concerns about how our marketing department was being structured and built and the things that we were working on and the campaigns that we were being asked to produce and the work that we were being asked to do as a marketing team from our new chief marketing officer, in the absence of having the ability to voice those concerns, raise those potential landmines that I was seeing, the questions that I had that I didn't have a great answer to. In the absence of that, what did I do? I actively worked against everything that was going on. Not saying that that was right, but there are many of you and many other people not listening to this who would and have done the same thing. Withheld support often simply means, or active support against, is often the result of unvoiced concerns, unanswered questions that, if never given the opportunity, they will always be there as a silent friction piece until the thing blows up. So if you can, again, understand that element of it, then you can go seek out what those unvoiced concerns are, what those unanswered questions are, so that you can begin to gain a clearer picture of everything that's happening. Again, that requires an extractive communicative mindset. I also want you to release yourself of pressure to have all the answers, to be the smartest person in the room. When we talk about communicative confidence, this tends to be the underlying story that we're telling ourselves. That to be confident, to own the room in a leadership position, I hear this a lot with new leaders that I work with and coach as their executive communication coach. That when I show up to a board meeting or a leadership team meeting or a meeting where the C-suite is I'm briefing them on a project that I helped lead, that there is such an intense amount of pressure that I put on myself to have all the answers and to be the smartest person in the room on that subject. Now, are there instances where you do and should and are the smartest person in the room? Of course, that is absolutely going to often be the case when you've been put into a position of authority or leadership or control, we'll call it. But also understand that when you communicate solely from that space, you put a lot of pressure on yourself, and your communication again becomes exertive. It becomes an exertion mentality where you have to have all of the answers, and anything less than that is seen as wrong or failure or not being confident enough. But let me tell you, the most confident way to communicate in the world is to be asked a question, to not know the answer and say, that is a phenomenal question, one that I think is incredibly important. And I don't have the confidence that I can answer it fully and correctly right now, but I'm going to get you that answer. I will take that as a to do, and I will get you that answer within the week or however long it takes you, however long you think. That is an intensely confident person who can say, I don't have the answer. Then you can back it up by extracting. Can you repeat that so I can be clear what you're asking so that I don't waste anyone's time in getting you this answer? What exactly are you looking for? What exactly do you want to see? Extraction, question asking. We're pulling that out of people. Another way that we can move into the extractive communication is to be open to the idea that you could be wrong. For those lacking confidence who always think they're wrong or defer to others, you want to avoid self-disqualifying language. So you want to avoid language that says, well, I could be wrong about this, or I'm not the expert in this. That's not what I'm talking about here. What instead you want to do is share through your perspective, share through your observation, but be open to the idea that there are other perspectives, other observations that could be in conflict, that could maybe not exactly align, but scratch the surface of what you're talking about, but then go a different, like, there are so many different ways that we can think about being open to the idea that you could be wrong and still being confident in what you know and what you bring to that conversation or to that situation. Aim to share your thoughts through the lens of your perspective. Based on what I know, based on what I've seen, based on what I've observed, from my perspective, From the information that I have from these sources, here's what I think. Here's what I believe. Here's what looks to be the best way to proceed. All of those display a quality of I am bringing my confident perspective to this conversation, but I'm also open. I'm leaving the door open to the idea that mine is not the only one and that I could be wrong. And finally, to be a better communicator as you move into 2026, when challenged, lean in rather than get defensive. And I don't just mean I don't just mean through your language here. In some instances, this is physically leaning in. We can get defensive and sit back and cross our arms and withdraw when we get defensive or when we get challenged. And I want you to lean in. I want you to get closer. I want you to share space with those who may challenge you, who may disagree, who may critique or criticize. I believe it's Brene Brown that says it's hard to hate someone up close. When you can physically and communicatively lean into a conversation where you are challenged, that's where your extractive communication skills and abilities are at their height. They're at their peak. When somebody can challenge you and say, you can say, I actually don't see it that way. I actually disagree based on what I know, but I'm curious. Can you tell me more? Please share how you came to your perspective, to that answer, to please share how you came to that conclusion because it's so different from mine. Let's dig in here. That's a lean in communication style rather than a exertive communication style where when challenged you just say nope, 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 you're wrong, you have no idea, you're stupid, you're an idiot for believing that. There's only one possible way that we can get this done and it is this way. that's that's the communicative lessons of our youth, the childlike communication where most of us have an a superseding level of confidence about how good we are at that because we are really good at communicating in that style. We want to shut down the conversation. We want to have the mic drop moment. We want to make sure that our voice is heard, our ideas are heard, and listen to nothing else and talk over or debate or argue our point sometimes to where we just exhaust the other party. People don't change that way. That doesn't accomplish what you want. It may in the short term, and it may if you have the authority or control, but people aren't going to rally around you. People aren't going to get on board with your ideas. People aren't going to be inspired by you. People are going to want to distance themselves from you. The only ones who will remain close are the ones who only believe like you do for various reasons. And we see that. We see that in our politics. We see that in society. We see that on social media. We see that in our schools. We see that in our businesses and some of the characters running departments and companies these days. Communicative confidence is rampant and it's misguided. It's incomplete. That observation was no more founded than it was in my mind in 2025. But I am open to the fact or the idea that I might be wrong and that I want to hear from you. If you disagree with this, please email me, Michael at rethinkingcommunication.com. That's my email address. Email me if I'm not seeing something here or if I'm experiencing it differently because of who I am and the makeup and where I've come from or where I look like. I want to know. I want to know because there's always that possibility that I could be wrong. My goal here is to get you to think about how you're showing up in communication and how you could be more effective. Listen, I'm applying this to myself right now. One of my earlier questions was, what's my goal? I just stated it for you. What could I be missing? I'm inviting that in and I want to seek that out. But I got to tell you, from what I know and what I've learned, what I've seen, what I've coached through, communicative confidence isn't about being self assured, that others bend to your will. Communicative confidence is about your ability to bring others along with you. It took a lot of hard lessons for me to reroute my communication skills and approach. I lost my job as a senior level executive at a very large company because I was not able to see these lessons. But I promise you, everything that I've shared with you, this is fire tested. I've been an executive for years. I've been in my current role leading a marketing team for almost 8.5 years now. And I still am in an executive role. I've done this. I've led through this and I've challenged myself to get better at this. I know this approach works because I have self-corrected and I've helped others do the same as a speaking and communications coach, both in the team format setting where I'm training groups of leaders at companies and in one-on-one coaching engagements where I'm helping a new leader or you know adjust to the communicative demands on their presence and their time, or a seasoned CEO who wants to make sure they're showing up as they lead their company through transition. All of these things are battle tested. They're fire tested. I've self corrected myself. I am not the same person I was all those years ago, actively working to undermine that CMO. Again, I'm not proud of that. And I'm glad that I have changed and I blame myself. But it has also been through the work of understanding I was operating from a place of not knowing what I don't know or what I didn't know that I don't want you to take into 2026. If you think you're a good communicator here, consider what I've shared. Consider if that's how you show up. If you're communicating through the lessons of your youth, or if you are communicating as a well rounded communicator where you are sitting in extractive communication more than you are sitting in exertive communication. And which one do you see as being the more confident communicator or communication style? And which one do you see as accomplishing the ability to change others for the cause that you care about or the thing that you want to accomplish, the goal that you've set forth? When we get into those conversations and we can bring well-rounded exertive and extractive communication to the forefront, that's when we can really change how we show up in the world, not just as communicators, but as leaders, as parents, as siblings, as members of society, as politicians, on and on down the list. This to me is the defining characteristic and quality that I'm bringing into 2026 that I will be speaking a lot on in 2026 is how do we communicate well and how do we make sure that we not unlearn the lessons of our youth, but that we grow beyond them. I hope this was helpful for you. Again, if you have any thoughts or ideas that you would love to share, any ideas for future episodes that you would like my thoughts on, please reach out to me. It's Michael at rethinkingcommunication.com. I promise that goes straight to my inbox. I answer all my emails unless you're trying to sell me something that I don't want. And I hope to see you on the next episode of Rethinking Communication, the podcast. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful and blessed 2026.